Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we have a special guest joining us, Bauer Kahan joining us. Rebecca, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
It's good. Thanks for having me. Fun to be on today.
I know. Thanks for coming on and talking a little bit about yourself and kind of your road here. Can you kind of give us a little background on yourself and how you ended up in Sacramento?
It's a good question.
Why?
So I'm a California native, so that part I got going for me. But I never envisioned myself ending up a elected official or a politician. But here I am. I am an attorney by training. I went to Georgetown Law and became a litigator, which is what I did for many years, specializing in environmental regulatory work. Then I went and taught law school. I did that for about 8 years. And then 2016 came and went, and the world changed for me. I'm the granddaughter of refugees. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. My grandmother was still alive in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected. And for the first time in my life, I saw my grandmother afraid. And that was really powerful. She had left Vienna, Austria at 18 years old. So she very much remembered and knew what had happened to her family, had lost family members in the war, and had always believed so deeply in this country that had saved her and her family. And for the first time, she saw us taking a turn down a really scary path. And I think that woke me up to what this country needed. And I believed that I had to do my part. I started by doing pro bono work. It was my bread and butter. It's what I had done for my career. I organized the attorneys at SFO after the Muslim ban. It felt like a very full circle moment for me. That's how my family had come to this country, right, as refugees. And here I was helping people who were landing in the same circumstances enter our country. And it invigorated me and it gave me hope. And what I saw that day was that if each of us stepped up and did our part, that our country could continue to follow the values that each of us holds. And so I decided I had to do more. And through that process, decided that the best thing to do was to run for the state legislature and do my part as a Californian who was going to really hold the line on the issues that I hold near and dear, climate change being one of my top priorities, knowing that if we deregulated at the federal level, it was really going to come down to California to hold the line and protect our future and the future of my children. So I ran for office and I won, and I've had the privilege of representing my district for 3 years.
Wait, so you ran in 2018, right?
2018, yeah. I was elected in 2018, sorry.
2018, okay.
Yeah.
And that was, that seat was held by Catherine Baker previously, right? That's kind of a swing state. So I guess coming out of nowhere in 2016 to 2018, that's a pretty major accomplishment. How did you kind of, get the support of the local kind of party and things like that to kind of become the front runner and kind of win that seat?
I'd been a part of the community for a long time. I was on a committee of my school board. I had worked with a lot of community members on an effort to do STEAM labs at all of our local elementary schools. I was on the board of my synagogue. So I was involved in the community in meaningful ways, volunteer for Moms Demand Action. But this wasn't in my sights. And then when I decided that this was something I would take on, it was really my community that stepped up and backed me and said they wanted someone who was going to represent their values and really do the work that they wanted done at this moment in time. So it was a grassroots effort of people who believed in me, and we did it by the skin of our teeth.
Yeah. So are you originally from the Bay Area, or have you going to law school in Georgetown, on the other side of the country? I guess kind of what brought you back here to the Bay?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the peninsula, born and raised in Silicon Valley, and but I went back east for both my undergrad and my law degree. But I'm a Californian, so I practiced law for 1 year in DC, and I just found that it wasn't my speed. I needed to come home, and so I ended up transferring to a law firm in San Francisco and practicing out here. And I was dating my now husband at the time, who was living out here, so he may have been part of the reason.
Small part. So this is always was so interesting to me. Going to law school, practicing the law, and then going to make the law. Kind of what were your thoughts going in of how the legislature worked and making laws, as a professor and as an attorney, to now being in it and actually doing it? Kind of what was your sense beforehand, and now that you're doing it, what kind of your thoughts on how bills are made and laws are made?
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that question, because often people say, how did it meet your expectations? I didn't know what to expect, right? I never been in the legislature. I never worked in the legislature. I had really spent most of my career in the judicial branch, right? As a litigator. And here I was going to work in the legislative branch. Obviously having done a ton of work in the law, I understand the law in a deep way, but making it is very different. But I've actually found one of the most fascinating things was how transferable my skill set was. But if you think about, a trial lawyer and a litigator, right? Most of the time our cases don't go to trial, right? They settle, right? So it's a negotiation. Right. How do you find a way to get to where everyone feels good about the resolution? And that work of making policy is very similar, right? You have a goal, you're out to accomplish this goal, but how do you get people with different views to come to the table, to sit down with you, to figure out a way to meet in the middle and move the policy goal forward? So it has actually been more similar than I expected. Some days I wish we had a judge who would be the ultimate arbiter. We don't have that. Right. It is similar.
Right. I remember like one of the first bills I started working on, and there were some amendments that came in, and I was like, well, but that's not constitutional. And the response was, well, it has the votes, so that's all that matters. Go to the courts later. And I was like, wow, this is a different world.
It's very different.
Yeah. So kind of, being an environmental lawyer by trade and kind of, knowing that aspect, kind of how have you used that kind of in, making laws or I guess searching changes and kind of some of the environmental policies here in the state?
Yeah, one of the things is that I think we are incredible at in California is setting goals, knowing where we want to go to protect climate, to be where we are, to give our children the future they deserve. And I think the background that I have as a regulatory lawyer, which is very in the weeds, right? This is nuanced work, I think has brought to bear really detail oriented. How do we get to those goals, right? Yes, we want all clean vehicles. We want a clean energy future, but what are the steps we have to take to actually achieve that, to get to where California needs to be? And so, we introduced a bill last year that we'll continue to work on that related to pollinators, focused on how we keep our food chain clean and healthy. In my first year, I worked on clean water and farming, right? I'd done a lot of work in clean water and really focused on how do we transition our small farmers to more sustainable practices, both with drought and with making sure our water tables remain clean. I've gotten involved in the efforts around PFAS in our water. I have wells in my own district that have had to shut down as a result of too much of that carcinogen in the well. So how do we get those clean? How do we support our communities in doing that? How do we prevent those carcinogens from entering the water table? I supported a bill Senator Allen moved around firefighting foam, which has that PFAS, and we're removing it because many of the wells in my district were near a firefighting training center. Was that how we had contaminated the water? And so we don't know the answer to that, but we should be doing everything we can to do our best. So really using that nuanced work to make sure that I'm moving the ball forward on the things that really matter to have a clean, healthy environment.
Yeah. So I guess since you've came in the legislature in 2018, maybe you had one kind of normal session, but it's been, I guess, kind of crazy ever since then with remote things and bill limits. So kind of, you guys were all limited to 12 bills this year. Kind of what are some of the things that you focused on and worked on, and kind of what'd you get to the governor's desk this year?
Yeah, I entered, as you mentioned, I entered the legislature in a different time, pre-pandemic, with a vision of what this would look like for me. And obviously, all of our lives changed when COVID took over our lives. And that's true of the work we're doing in the legislature. We went from a set of priorities to really focused on our communities in a very different way of helping them get through this incredibly trying time. And so I've done some bills to assist with that. I did a couple of small business bills, really focused on our businesses in California that have suffered from these open, close policies we've had to do to keep our communities safe. So one of those is related to mediation for our small businesses, so they won't have to bear the brunt of litigation costs if they violate some of our employment laws, giving them an opportunity for free mediation, which is much less costly for small businesses than if you have to go to court. We did a bill on alcohol to go, making sure that policy. I know, right? One of my colleagues from across the aisle said it was his favorite bill of the year. But, that's been a lifeline for our small restaurants, right? The ability to get those extra dollars on those to-go orders. I still have 3 unvaccinated children, so I'm still shy to eat indoors in a restaurant, but we do takeout to support our local businesses, and I'm happy to do that. So really looking at how we can support our businesses and our community, their health, but also not forgetting what I was elected to do, right? I came in committed to fighting climate change, and we'll continue to do that. So we've moved several pieces of legislation to prevent wildfires. It's the largest source of emissions right now. We really have to get a handle on it, both for our safety, but also for climate change. So we moved 2 bills on that issue. Again, we moved that bill on pollinators. And then women's rights is a huge issue. Reproductive rights at this moment in time, California has to continue to lead. I'm the chair of the Select Committee on Reproductive Health. So we're really looking at how we can continue to provide access to women to comprehensive reproductive health care, including abortions. So we had a bill signed into law a couple of weeks ago that will protect our patients and our workers at our clinics, making sure that we have safe and comprehensive access, because that's the biggest threat right now, are these threats that are happening in front of and to our clinic workers and patients. And then, what else? So much.
What about a bill, that has gotten, I guess, a lot of press recently because it's, kind of, we'll have to educate ourselves on, but what about AB 988? Can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of the new mental health crisis hotline you started?
Yeah, that's one of my babies. It did not make it to the governor's desk. We're going to keep working on that in January, but it is very near and dear to my heart. One of the things that I have a background in some criminal defense work. While I was practicing, I ran our pro bono program and had the opportunity to work in the criminal justice system. So that's been a real priority for me, is figuring out how we can provide a more just system. And through the opportunity of getting to know a family in my district who lost their son to police officer shooting when he was in the middle of a mental health crisis, I really learned how we were failing those who are in mental health crisis. And so 988 was really born out of that. And what it will do is it will take those in mental health crisis out of the criminal justice system. So you will not call 911 and get a police response. Instead, you'll call 988 and you'll get a mental health response. You'll get a healthcare response, which is exactly what you deserve. And it is a big lift because we're going to fund an entire system of mobile crisis response teams and stabilization services for those who are in crisis. But it's really critical work because 25% of officer-involved shootings are those in mental health crisis. And all those people need is a healthcare response. So if we take that out of the equation, it makes a huge difference in what's happening on our streets.
So I guess what was the roadblock you faced? Was it a funding issue or was there something else?
So the bill, well, we did have a big win. So we got I think it was $20 million in startup costs. So we are starting to do the buildup of the call centers so that we will go live in July with 988, but we are doing ongoing funding. So it has a fee in it that will cover the funding for all of the phone system, the stabilization services, and those crisis response teams. And we just needed a little bit more time to figure out how we would do this in a state of this size. As you imagine, our counties are not all the same, and they don't all look the same, right? I mean, you have urban counties, you have rural counties, you have small counties, you have big counties. So how do we create a system that works for every Californian when every Californian is not similarly situated, both by funding it properly and also creating a system that achieves the goal the legislature wants to achieve, which is removing law enforcement from these calls when they're not the appropriate responder, and ensuring that they get an immediate response when that's what's necessary. So we just needed more time to work out what that will look like, but we're optimistic that it'll happen this year.
So, I guess we had record budget surpluses this year and, a lot of programs were funded. What were, in addition to this program, I guess, what other sorts of things were you able to, I guess, get, for your district or some other priority?
Yeah, so one of the other huge victories, something I've been working on since my first year in the legislature, which was only 3 years ago, but it's still 3 years is a long time, was a piece of open space we've been trying to protect out in Livermore in eastern Alameda County. The Diablo Range is an incredible range for wildlife corridor, and there is a piece of open space right now that is a pinch point in that wildlife corridor where the wildlife can go down the range. And that was going to be turned into an off-road vehicle park, which would really be disastrous for the wildlife, the species that live on the land, those that move on the land, and also the historic and Native American elements that are there. So we've been working to save it. And this year in the budget, we were able to get the funds to do that and to save that land in perpetuity. And it will turn into a passive recreation, a hiking park where nature and the community can coexist in ways that are really harmonious. So that was a huge win, I think, for open space, for my community, and for climate. So that's big. We continue to work towards more funding for transportation. That's really important in the part of the Bay Area I represent where people have long commutes. So we're working on more funding there, although we haven't gotten all the way there. We'll continue to focus on that. We have a train out that we want to connect the Central Valley into Dublin, Pleasanton, BART station called Valley Link. It's really critical in some of what's happening. The two of the top 10 longest commutes are right out there in Stockton. And so we really want to give those people easier commutes into the jobs in the Bay Area and take some of that traffic off the road in that valley where we're seeing a lot of, obviously, air emissions as a result. So that's something we're working on. We were able to get more parks and other great things for the district that we're excited to see come to fruition in the next year.
Yeah, driving that 205 over the Ultimate Pass, was bad 10 years ago. I can't even imagine what it is now.
And trucking has increased so much, right? We're all ordering on Amazon. So there's more and more trucks on the road, which is the route they take.
And all the centers are right there in the valley, right? So all shipped over the hill. Wow. Increase. So, you just had, the end of session. You guys ended early for the first time ever, which was amazing. So kind of what?
That 12 bill limit.
Is really what is it here to stay? No. So what are you planning for next year? Have you already, started looking at, what you're looking at next year and kind of some of the things you want to do?
We are. I mean, I think, it's always a process. I always want to do more than we have the bandwidth to do. There's so much good to be done in California. And we have constituents who are so supportive of some incredible work. So we'll continue to work on 988. We really are committed to getting to the finish line on that bill and changing the way mental health is dealt with in California. I think that'll be an ongoing effort. The bill that is before us, when that becomes law, we have to build the infrastructure under it. We have to have a full series of mental health services for those that need it in California. I'm going to continue to work on juvenile justice issues. One of my favorite bills this year, although I think I say that about all of them, to be honest with you, is a bill that allowed for an immediate and expedited appeal for juveniles who are being transferred from juvenile court to adult court. Prior to this, there was no required appeal for those youth. And it is the most consequential decision they will face is whether they leave the juvenile system, which is really rehabilitative, and go into the adult system where they're in with adults and we know that their outcome won't be as good. And so we were able to give them an appeal to get a review of that decision and ensure that they're in the right part of our system. And I feel really good about that. It's about 100 youth a year that get transferred, and those youth now will take a second look at whether that's the right decision for them in their case. So we're going to continue down that path, looking at how we can help the juveniles in our system get better rehabilitation. I have a bill pending on recidivism and rehabilitation and the money we're spending on it, making sure that we are spending those dollars wisely and getting the results that those that are in the system need and that our communities need to stay safe. We'll continue down the environmental path. We're going to continue to try to do wildfire prevention and work on those bills that ensure that PG&E is doing right by Californians and keeping us safe, holding their feet to, I won't say feet to the fire because that's the wrong analogy here, but making sure that they're doing responsible things with our lines. They should be able to provide safe, reliable energy, and they have failed to do that. So we're going to make sure that happens. And just keep working, doing the good work we've been doing.
Something you touched on earlier kind of was like the environmental kind of things and greenhouse gases and kind of global warming. California has tried to do so much, but I guess what more can we do? Like, what more is there to do, on that subject to kind of get us in an area where we start seeing results?
Yeah, I mean, they say, so the two largest things we can do are wildfire prevention, prevent the release of all of these, these trees are all holding all of those emissions and they just go up in flames. It's really bad for our environment. So I do believe wildfire prevention has to be top of the list for us. But the second is transportation is the largest source of emissions, right? We know that. And so we have to do more and better. And currently, we have a lot of electric vehicle drivers in our wealthier communities, but it's not accessible to every Californian. Our trucks are not clean right now, and we could move to a clean trucking future, and we should. So how do we really revolutionize transportation to ensure that we are not emitting there? I also think there's a lot we need to do on drought resiliency, right? I mean, we're seeing it right now. The reason that we are in the situation we're in is because it was too hot, too fast, right? And we didn't capture enough water. So how do we capture more water? And again, I'll say it, I said it already on this podcast, but how do we keep our water tables clean? How do we put groundwater into the ground and keep it clean so it's accessible to us when we need it? So there is a lot of work still to be done. I know California is leading the way, but trust me, we're not done. And plastics. I didn't mention plastics. Why is California failing to respond to the cry of our Californians and constituents that they want us to regulate plastic? So we got to do that too.
Wildfire has been a topic, it feels like, for a decade, but maybe it's only been 5 years, and we keep increasing funding and doing certain things. I guess, what aren't we currently doing that we need to do more of?
Well, I mean, I'm biased because this is what my legislation is trying to do, but I do think we do need, we have a real problem with these PG&E caused wildfires. And I think we need to be doing more oversight there. I've said it publicly in hearings. I don't think the PUC is sufficiently overseeing PG&E to ensure that we're doing everything we can to stop our lines from causing wildfires. So I introduced legislation 2 years ago and pushed it again this year that would give our local district attorneys oversight authority over those wildfire mitigation measures that PG&E should be putting into place. We need local individuals overseeing this and making sure that we are actually enforcing the laws that are on the books, because the laws are there, but we don't have the bandwidth to enforce them. And so we need more of that. So I think that's really big. And then we have to, you talk about the spending, but we're not seeing the mitigation work we need done, right? We're not seeing our forests thinned in the way we need. And that is why these fires are so out of control and go for so long. So we do need to be doing that work and doing it in a meaningful way, which then begs the question, what do we do with all that material we're thinning out of the forests? Because that is a real problem and we have to deal with it. And that has been a real controversy in the legislature, but I have been supportive of using it to create energy because we have it, we need to deal with it, and burning it can actually be a way to hold off those emissions and use the energy to create alternatives to natural gas and fossil fuels.
Oh, interesting. And, earlier you mentioned you had 3 unvaccinated children at home. So I assume that means they're all under 12.
I should have said that. Yes, they're all under 12. They will be vaccinated when they can be.
Kind of how has that experience been, I guess, the last year, dealing with, 3 children at home and working the legislature back and forth and distance learning and that and the like?
There was a group of us that were at the forefront of the movement to really push California to reopen schools. And all of us had young children who were at home learning with us. And we were seeing firsthand what it was doing to them, both in, learning, pushing their learning back and slowing it down, but also the mental health toll it was taking on them and being isolated. And, I see my son is in 2nd grade. So he left in the middle of kindergarten and then missed all of 1st grade and is now in 2nd grade. And they do not have the social emotional skills that my other 2 did when they were in 2nd grade, because they missed really critical years of being with other children and engaging with them and learning those skills. And so we have a lot of work to do, but it was hard. Like every other working parent and working mother, it was a lot of juggling. For those that were in meetings with me when recess happened, all the kids would come in and be in my meetings during recess. But, we were all making it work and doing our best and serving the constituents. My office and I, served thousands of individuals who needed EDD help. We supported our small businesses and we did the best we could. And my kids were just alongside to see it all happen.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Well, awesome. Well, hopefully they can stay in school. Yeah. I have never done so much assisted coloring. I was like, man, this is bad, this coloring. So
no, the math. I have to tell you, Common Core math. I was like, we need to go back to the classroom because I do not know how to do Common Core math.
Yeah, that was no fun either. No fun indeed.
Yeah. But Assemblymember Garcia became the math tutor of the kids at the legislature.
Oh,
so
that's good.
There's a little insider tip.
You did have a math expert there at your fingertips. So
yeah,
good resources. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Awesome information. And it was good hearing from you. And hope to check in with you later next year to see what you're up to and continue learning more about what more can be done.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It was a fun conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Have a good one.
Awesome. You too.
All right.